The Joker is undoubtedly Batman's arch-nemesis and is one of the most iconic villains of all time. And over the past few decades, we've gotten quite a few different iterations of the character in both animation and live action. But I think it's gone a little overboard and we've actually received far too much Joker recently. Batman does have perhaps the deepest rogues gallery of villains ever created, so I think it's time to pass the torch to other villainous forces. Let's give bad guys like Hugo Strange, Mad Hatter, Hush, and Clayface a chance to shine. I mean, at this point I just have extreme Joker fatigue, and Joker 2 was kind of the last straw. I don't want to see the Clown Prince of Crime back on the big screen for a very, very long time. But I think it's important to track how we got to this point and the history of the Joker in live action, in order to uncover how we ended up with this oversaturation of the uber-popular Deadly Clown. Perhaps unknown to most, but the character of the Joker was originally inspired by a 1928 film titled The Man Who Laughs, which was an adaptation of Victor Hugo's novel of the same name. In this film, Comrade Veidt portrayed a character named Gwynplaine, who wore heavy makeup and was described by critics as having a grotesque grin. So much so that this silent film, despite being written to be a melodrama, was received as a horror film by viewers, just off of the lead character's appearance alone. And while this is technically not the first live-action Joker, it is where the roots of what the character would become were planted. Almost 4 decades later, we'd get our first official live-action Joker played by Cesar Romero, who appeared in over 20 episodes of the Adam West-led Batman series, and a theatrical film released in 1966. And Romero did a great job of building off of Conrad's foundation. This version of the character is quite campy, but meshes with the vibe of the Batman series and movie really well. If we're gonna suspend our disbelief enough to accept Batman fighting super fake-looking sharks that explode when they hit the water, then Romero's performance fits right in with the rest of the series. And I would say that Jack Nicholson took great inspiration from what Cesar Romero did with the character, when it came time for Nicholson to pick up the torch in 1989. And I think there's a few important things to note before analyzing Jack's performance as the Clown Prince of Crime. The first being that we had over 20 years between Romero putting down the clown makeup and Nicholson picking it up. And the second being that Jack Nicholson was already one of the greatest actors of all time. He had already been in films like Chinatown, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and The Shining, so his legacy was cemented. And he actually brought a lot of prestige to the role of the Joker. To have someone who was widely regarded as one of the greatest actors of all time and was still viewed to be in his acting prime take on the role of the Joker meant that some of Nicholson's prestige would definitely rub off on the character. I think Jack's out there and zany, yet cold and calculated performance as the Joker really helped move the character forward, at least in terms of the live action side of things, because while the 1960s series was super popular, it was also very silly and ridiculous, and kind of placed both Batman and the Joker in that same box. So I view Nicholson's Joker and the Batman '89 film in general as being a really important middle ground between the campy Batman of the 60s and the dark and grounded versions we'd get of the characters in the 21st century. Jack managed to walk a really thin tightrope between campy and dark with his Joker that I think importantly showed viewers and producers that Batman and his world could work in a more gritty context and setting. And I think having such an iconic actor give such an iconic performance as the Joker honestly scared other actors from wanting to pick up the mantle of a live-action Joker. To outdo one of the best to ever do it was always going to be a daunting task. And Mark Hamill had the animation side of things on lock, as he was providing us with incredible performances of the character throughout the 1990s, chiefly in Batman the Animated Series, so the Joker once again sat on ice in terms of the live-action side of things for quite some time. That is, until Christopher Nolan took over the reins. The Dark Knight is regarded by most to be one of the greatest films ever made, and for good reason. I think it is an objective masterpiece. It debuted in 2008, a whole 19 years after Nicholson's portrayal of the Joker, and Heath Ledger would bring an extremely dark and anarchist version of the character to life. Ledger's killer clown is essentially Nicholson's version, but with all of the camp ripped out. He is an agent of pure chaos, and is almost animalistic in his approach to bringing down Gotham. Unfortunately, Heath Ledger passed away after his legendary performance, but he was awarded the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and honestly, I'd argue that he was much more than just a supporting role, and ended up stealing the show. But regardless of who you view as the main character of the film, it was pretty clear to most that Heath gave the performance of a lifetime, and supplanted the great Jack Nicholson as the best live-action Joker of all time. And I also think this performance marked a change in how the public and other actors started viewing this role. I believe that it shifted from being viewed as a difficult role that required a very special actor to pull off, to a role that provided a huge spotlight and a chance to go down in infamy. You see, I think Heath Ledger winning an Oscar as the Joker led other actors to viewing the Clown Prince of Crime as a role that could make a career. With the prestige that Nicholson had originally given the role, and getting to see a different actor bring an entirely different version of the character to light, and arguably topping what Jack had done, I think the floodgates metaphorically opened, and actors started eyeing the chance to put on the clown makeup. In my assessment, this is probably what primarily drew Jared Leto to wanting to portray the Joker in 2016. Jared Leto, similar to Ledger, is a method actor and likes to really get into character for movie roles. And while things didn't go nearly as well this go around, partially because of Leto's performance, partially because of the terrible handling of the Suicide Squad film, the important thing to note here is that it had been less than a decade since Ledger's outing as the Joker, and that method actors were starting to see great allure in the role. And this can further be seen with Joaquin Phoenix picking up the reins in 2019, just 3 years after Leto's disastrous run, and 11 years after Ledger's lone outing. And Phoenix would again bring Oscar prestige to the role, as he won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal of the Joker, or should I say Arthur Fleck, because to me, this is just not the Joker. I think that in viewing the Joker as a role for a method actor to really make their own and take creative liberties with, we kind of lost sight of what the Joker really is. The Joker, at least in my eyes, is supposed to represent the exact opposite of Batman. If the Caped Crusader stands for justice and order, then the Joker is an agent of chaos and is the living embodiment of the cruel randomness of fate. He is a complete psychopath with no moral compass, and there is some creative liberties that an actor or director can take with this. I think a campy iteration of a psychopath who finds humor in the suffering of others, and a super dark anarchist version, are both fine interpretations, because they keep the heart of the character intact. But to me, Phoenix doesn't capture the heart of who the Joker is. Don't get me wrong, he shows off some incredible acting, but he is really just playing a mentally ill person who creates a separate persona that they can escape into. And while you can argue that this is an origin story for the Joker, and we were seeing how the Clown Prince of Crime came to be, I think the Joker being the only personality is essential for the character. As we see in The Dark Knight, not understanding the Joker was what made him so dangerous. And when you add the Arthur personality to the mix, it kind of ruins this. It would be fine if the Arthur Fleck persona eventually was overtaken by the Joker and Arthur ceased to exist, but as Joker 2 shows us, this just isn't the case. Joker 2 largely confirms my qualms with Joaquin Phoenix's character. He even self-admits that there is no Joker. He, Arthur Fleck, is the one who did these awful things. And ignoring that Joker 2 was just an abysmal movie in general, I think that this was just awful for the character. By the end of the film, we are so far removed from what and who the Joker should be. And I know that the person who stabbed and killed Fleck is supposed to be the real Joker, and this was all really his origin story, but in response to that, I guess I would have to say that these two movies were just a waste of time then? I mean, if they only served to set up a character who got next to no screen time, I feel that my time was completely thrown out the window. And if we're gonna keep it a buck, even though I think it's a pretty good film, the 2019 Joker is really just doing its best taxi driver impersonation, just saying. But more importantly, getting back to the main argument, We have seen a great uptick in the frequency of live-action Jokers. It went from a once every 20 years or so performance to something we see every other year almost. I mean, after Heath Ledger, we got a version in the Gotham television series, Jared Leto, one briefly in Titans, Joaquin Phoenix, and now Barry Keoghan, who played the character in a deleted scene in The Batman and will likely play the Joker in future sequels. And for me, this is just too much. As I said, there's a few different ways you could take the character without betraying the foundation of who he is, but because we're seeing so much of him, I think directors, writers, and actors have lost sight of the Joker. I think we're starting to see very, very loose adaptations in order to separate themselves from everything else that's happening with the character. And to me, a better way of handling this oversaturation is to just stop. Give it 20 years or so and then give us another Joker, because it'll feel fresh and new again. I think this is a much better alternative to fundamentally changing the character, just so you can give us yet another one within a short period of time, especially when we've just had at least 5 different Jokers in the past decade. I think my worst fear is that we get a prominent Joker in both the Batman timeline and the DCU timeline, because not only will the character just be completely overdone, we'd then have 2 happening simultaneously, which is going to confuse the casual fans out there, but is also going to force the 2 actors to potentially stray from the heart and soul of the character in order to distinguish themselves from one another. The Joker is great, he's an icon for a reason, but it's been too much as of late. I think I speak for most fans when I say, it's time to put the clown makeup down, stop telling jokes, and let the role sit on ice for a bit. Well, if you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this analysis of the oversaturation of the Joker. Please let me know in the comments, do you agree with my assessment of the Joker growing stale as a character? Or do you think we should get a version of the Joker in both the Batman timeline and the DCU timeline respectively? As always, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more screen stories. Until next time, peace.